Hello and welcome to this week's A Photographic Life. If you're looking for somebody who knows what truth is, that's not me. I think the lady confused me. People need someone who's more like Rick Rubin, who says quotable short sentences of great universal beauty. And I don't even like sitting alone in silence. I don't have what it takes to be of spiritual guidance. She was so excited, more than I was. She said, I have arrived. I'm headed straight for enlightenment. The Swiss-born, Berlin-based singer-songwriter Anna Erhard there, and her song, Not Rick. I recommend it. It's a jolly tune, and there's some wisdom in there too, I think. There are few in the photographic world that I turn to for wisdom, but we lost one of them just a few weeks ago. Brazilian photographer Sebastião Salgado is of course best known for his captivating black and white photographs. He's documented scenes of hardship and desperation in times of war and famine. He's explored global labour and migration, and he's captured the wonders of the natural world. Salgado worked in more than 120 countries over the last 50 years and obviously is now regarded as one of the all-time greats of photography. His images are in the collections of museums and galleries around the world. He won the prestigious Premium Imperial Arts Prize in 2021 and was the 2024 recipient of the Sony World Photography Award for Outstanding Achievement. But for me, Salgado is more important not for his photographs, but for who he was. Raised on a cattle farm in eastern Minas Gerais state in Brazil, an early formative experience for him was leaving home for the city of Vitória in 1960. It was here, watching ships dock from all around the world, that he first felt the desire to travel. It's also where he met his wife Lélia, who is curator and editor of his work. He began a promising career as an economist, but switched to photography in the early 1970s after he and Lélia brought their first camera on holiday. Joining the Magnum agency in 1979 allowed him to refine his craft with the help and advice of Robert Capa and Cartier-Bresson. I have an issue with Salgado's work, however. Not the images, but the reproduction in books, particularly the Taschen published ones. The prints in the physical sense are beautiful and have all of the power that the subject matter demands. But to me, the books feel like poster art. They're too perfect. Black's too glossy. The paper feels cheap. I don't own one for those reasons. However, it is precisely these books that have given him such global recognition outside of the photographic community. So perhaps I am arguing against myself here. I once had a conversation with the photographer Jean-Luc Sief, who'd signed a deal in which the book that he had produced of his life work, his monograph, which was for sale at £150, was going to be reproduced cheaply. He was going to make a lot of money out of it, and his work was going to be available to more people. That, to him, seemed to make more sense. And I wonder if it did also to Salgado. Anyway, I was talking about his wisdom, and I think for me, it's almost impossible to look at his work without having his voice in the back of my head. So I think it's really important that people hear him speak. Now, you may already be aware of this. You may not be aware of his work. You may only be aware of his work. So let me recommend something to you to listen to see if you agree with me about the importance of hearing him talking about his life and how it informs his photography. There's a BBC Radio 4 interview on the Sounds app. I hope you can get that internationally, in which Salgado tells journalist John Wilson about some of his most famous photo series, including those on the themes of manual labour, which he called Workers and Exodus, the stories of global migration, covering the Rwandan genocide in 1994, as well as years of photographing refugees from wars, natural disasters and poverty, all of which took its toll on Salgado's mental health. He stopped photographing and returned to Brazil, where he and Lelia began reforesting his father's farm, now transformed into a national park of lush vegetation called Instituto Terra. The success of this venture led to Salgado returning to photography, this time seeking out beauty and landscapes in a series called Genesis, his love letter to the planet. To me, his love letter to the planet is him speaking, and I really recommend you check that audio recording out. Rest in power, Salgado. I've spoken previously about the amount of documentaries that are being made and have been made over the last few years, featuring photographers, about photographers. And there's now a rich source out there of inspiration, aspiration, information about photographers. And not only on YouTube, but, major documentaries as well. Some of them, I think, more successful than others. But anyway, I saw something recently that really did spark my interest. I suppose in a way it's because I spent so much time talking about photography and memory. And the name of the film is A Photographic Memory. It's a film, a documentary film, that won the Truer Than Fiction Award at the 2025 Film Independent Spirit Awards and a New York Times Critics' Pick. It's an intimate, genre-bending portrait of the filmmaker's trailblazing mother, Sheila Turner Seed. Now, she's somebody I'd never heard of, but a bit like when I made the Bill J film, I thought, wow, I really should have done, and I think I really should have heard of Sheila as well. She was a vibrant and pioneering journalist, photographer, and filmmaker who died suddenly and tragically when Rachel, the filmmaker, was just her daughter, was just 18 months old. Uncovering the vast archive Turner Seed produced, including lost taped interviews with iconic photographers such as Cartier-Bresson, Bruce Davidson, Cecil Beaton, Lisette Modell, and Gordon Parks, amongst others, Rachel in the film attempts to build a posthumous relationship with her mother through her interviews, photographs, journals, films, and the stories of those who remember her. The result, from the trailer I've seen, looks like an unlikely mother-daughter conversation that evades time and space, exploring universal themes of memory, loss, and legacy. I definitely think it's one to look out for. One film I have seen recently features another photographer, Joel Meyerowitz. Of course, we're all aware of his work over the decades. I can remember coming across his work, I think probably in the 1980s, and feeling that it perhaps felt a little bit too American to me, a little bit out of context of the kind of work I was seeing, that I was enjoying at the time. But there's no doubt that his work has, I think, in a sense, been rediscovered and repositioned. And now I understand it more and also really enjoy it. And I think as a person, he's really interesting. Well, a film that's just come out really will show you Joel as a person in perhaps a very different way than you may already appreciate him through his work and when he's talking about his work. But the film itself is so incredibly intimate and powerful, I have to recommend it to you. I'm not sure you're all going to enjoy it, and I'm not sure it's the kind of film you're meant to enjoy. Maybe you are, but it will certainly make you think. The film is called Two Strangers Trying Not to Kill Each Other. And I'm just going to read you the little kind of description of the film on the film's website. It says, when artist Maggie Barrett, 75, breaks her femur, her husband, Joel Meyerowitz, 84, a world-famous photographer, becomes her caregiver. In the shadow of mortality, each with a long and dramatic life behind them, the hard truths of life together provoke in Maggie and Joel an attempt to find a shared inner peace while there is still time. So that's the film. It is available to stream. That was how I saw it through Prime, Amazon Prime. I'm not sure if it is still there. It only cost me £5, I think, to download and stream. Highly worth checking out. Not to find out anything about Joel as a photographer or his, but about who he is as a man, who he is as a person, and about his relationships. And I would say about your relationships too. It certainly made me think. So that is my second recommendation for this week. One photographer I certainly struggle with and have done over the years, not for any reason I need to give you here, but anyway, is Rankin, English-based photographer you may or may not be aware of anyway. What I do think is interesting is something I saw, and it ties in, I suppose, in a sense, with those discussions about mortality that seem to be underlying this week's episode. He's always one to get on the idea of a project that's going to get some headlines, and no surprise, he's looking at AI. Anyway, the project is called Is This the Future of Photography or the End of It? 2 question marks in there. And this is an Instagram post that he's put up that I'm going to read you. It says, for the past 9 months, I've been deep in the machine using AI to create Fake, and that's F-A-I-K, all in caps, magazine and the exhibition Fake, F-A-I-K, off. Not to jump on a trend, well, not really Rankin, but there you go, but to interrogate it. What does it mean when creativity is outsourced? What do we lose when we stop noticing the difference between human and synthetic? Not sympathetic with Rankin. Anyway, there we go. When I first posted the gravestone image that accompanies this Instagram post last month, it was meant to provoke. It was also a rejected image from Fake magazine. The first slide in this post is what actually made it into the magazine. You can look this up if you wish on Rankin's Instagram account. Come and see the results at the Fake Off exhibition, free entry and a free copy of Fake magazine, available only during the show, and that's in London, and it was on until the 18th of May. So sadly, you've missed Rankin's exhibition. But the reason I raised it, and you can probably tell there's a certain element of kind of cynicism and tiredness in my voice when I'm dealing with those kind of stories, but I feel as if I need to bring them to you, is that I think there's nothing worse than jumping onto these bandwagons to try and make a point with a cheap idea. I'm sure that he's well-intentioned. I have seen some of the work. I don't usually talk about people's work on the podcast. Everyone I'm happy for everyone to do whatever they want to do, and if they think it's good, that's great, and that's fine. I'm not here to be a critic. However, with that kind of sensationalist headline, I'm going to put a question to you. Is it really doing photography any good to treat it like that? Whilst we're talking about doing photography good, I do recommend Harry Borden, friend of the podcast, a YouTube channel, Fred and Harry, in which he kind of, I suppose, reveals the realities of working as a professional photographer, but also in a recent film, he dropped by my photo crib. He came and visited the house, and I spoke to him a little bit about the photographs that hang on my walls. Photographs by photographers from, I suppose, Edith Tudor Hart, Colin Jones, Eugene Smith, Jim Mortram, a whole range of different photographers. Only 2 of my pictures actually hang on the walls or are near a wall. But anyway, if you are interested in that idea as to why do people hang photographs on walls, then you might want to check that film out. It's around half an hour long, so it's not going to take up too much of your time. But maybe also you'd like to question as to why you hang photographs on your walls. Whilst we're talking about photographic ephemera, and if you do watch that film, you'll see my house is full of ephemera or trinkets of various kinds. I'm a bit of a collector of stuff. I saw a post the other day by photographer Louis Palu, that's Palu, which I thought was interesting because it ties in very much to some of the conversations that Fiona Hayes and I have been having about Seesaw, or on Seesaw, I should say, our monthly photo exhibition roundup, about the idea of having ephemera, trinkets, stuff as part of an exhibition that's telling some of the narrative, the story of the exhibition, of the work, providing a little extra context. And so this post said this. It said, "So interesting to have my retired body armour, I have new armour now, as part of the permanent collection with Ansel Adams' dark cloth, Eugene Smith's wallet, Edward Weston's wedding ring, and Lola Alvarez's sunglasses on display at the Center for Creative Photography at the University of Arizona, with an amazing set of other photographers' prints, grateful, including mine." And I've actually been to the Center for Creative Photography down in Arizona because that is where a number of great collections of photographers exist. The Ansel Adams, of course, the Eugene Smiths, as mentioned, and also somebody previously mentioned in the podcast earlier, Bill J. His work is there as well. It's not interesting to get into and to see. I think they suffer financial funding difficulties. But anyway, that's a side issue. I just thought it was really interesting that he's put his body armour alongside some of the work. Obviously, something he's worn whilst photographing conflict. And I quite like that. I like that idea of seeing those things that made up the lives of the photographer. And in a way, I suppose it ties back. There seems to be a theme this week. Once again, never planned. Regular listeners, long-time listeners to this podcast will know it is put together literally on the back of a napkin. There is no running order or planning of any kind. I just sit down in front of the microphone and speak. And I've got a few sort of scraps that I've sort of put together to try and make something of. Anyway, so suffice to say, we were talking about the idea of Joel Meyerowitz there and understanding him as a man. We were talking about Salgado and the importance of his background. And now we're talking about actual physical elements that sum up who a photographer is. So again, something else I think to think about. I always remember there was an exhibition of Tish Murtha's photography, and they had her original Olympus with the receipt or a letter that David Hearn had been involved in lending her the money or something. I can't remember completely. For this camera that the photographs were taken on. And of course, the very famous one is Don McCullen's Nikon that's been destroyed and shot through and so forth. So all of these elements really add additional colour, additional context. So if you're working on something, maybe some of those trinkets that are surrounding you should be included in that exhibition or book. I thought we'd finish this week with a listener's letter. It says, "Hello, Mr. Scott, recent subscriber. So I'm responding to earlier podcasts. Sorry. Photography books with words. I'm an avid reader. I like history, and I most certainly appreciate when an essay places the work in a historical perspective context. Case in point is Robert Frank's Looking In. That book is made by the essays, and I would venture that they're the strongest point, since most photography people know the work and the added images only support the writing. I love when the essays place the work in a historical context. I don't when it attempts to convince me to like the work for purely esoteric reasons. On your landscape podcast, I think you both missed the point of shooting for yourself and not worrying about what others think of what you produce, which is what I think landscape photography is, IMHO. I will admit that I was drinking heavily during that episode, along with doing the dishes, so I may have reached a conclusion that was totally at odds to what you were saying, which can only be your fault, no? Anyway, Love your conversations and hope you have many more and have a happy life. Best, Michael Morris. Thank you very much, Michael. I love that response, particularly that insight to your heavy drinking and doing the dishes whilst doing so. Do keep your emails and your comments, your feedback coming. You don't have to agree with us. That's not the point. In fact, it's better if you don't. Let's have a rigorous debate and a rigorous discussion in these days when that seems to be so unfashionable. Anyway, that's it for this week's episode. Hope you've enjoyed it. Don't forget, we are also on YouTube at UN of Photo and, of course, on all the usual social media platforms, also as UN of Photo. Now, that's it. Take care.